griffins, dragons, unicorns, human-headed beasts. But few more strange than mysterious plants that ate people. In the 19th century, explorers described Attenborough tree from Madagascar. They said it had tentacles like great green serpents with the savage tenacity of anacondas. Of course, the Attenborough tree was only Victorian fiction, but like all good fiction, it contained a germ of truth. When Victorian naturalists explored the slopes of Mount Kinabalu in Borneo, they found something just as bizarre. Plants bearing huge pitchers. And one of these contained the partially digested body of a rat. The discovery caused a sensation. It fired the imagination of the greatest Victorian naturalist, Charles Darwin. Through painstaking experiments, he showed that many kinds of plants trapped and killed insects and then digested their bodies. And they did this with methods as macabre as any dreamed up in Victorian fiction. To be carnivorous, plants must catch and kill prey, and they've evolved 3 ways of doing this. Many work like flypaper, covered in sticky blobs that simply glue insects to their leaves. Others have leaves shaped into pitchers. The pitchers are full of liquid which drowns and digests trapped insects. Some of these plants have evolved traps of elaborate design. The third method, snap traps. Like old-fashioned mouse traps, they snap shut on their prey. When first discovered, these plants caused uproar. Do plants really catch and kill insects? A specimen was sent to the greatest botanist of the time. Swedish botanist Carl Linnaeus thought it was an abomination, blasphemy. It went against the way God had ordered the world. Linnaeus created the system of classifying all living things that we still use today. But he flatly refused to believe that plants could be carnivores. More than a century later, Charles Darwin would prove him wrong. He cultivated lots of carnivorous plants for his detailed experiments. But he worked mostly on a little plant called sundew, or Drosera. Darwin is most famous for explaining how new species originate, but was so fascinated by these extraordinary plants that he said, "I care more about Drosera than the origin of all the species in the world." The sundew is one of the sticky flypaper traps. It gets its name from the tiny droplets of sticky liquid, a kind of mucus, on the end of stalks on its leaves. Insects get stuck in this glue, but at the time most people thought this was just an accident. Darwin showed it was far more sinister than this. His results both astounded and frightened him. He put different substances on the leaves. Milk, meat, paper, stone, even urine, and recorded the plant's reactions. Milk caused the tentacles to fold over. So did meat and urine. But the plant didn't react to stone or paper. Darwin showed that any substance containing nitrogen triggered a reaction. He also found that the plant absorbed these nutrients through its leaves. It was a real carnivore, like an animal. But why have some plants turned carnivorous? Most of them live in places like this: bogs, swamps or marshes, with soils poor in nutrients like nitrogen. Yet there's plenty of nitrogen here. It's just walking around on 6 legs. All the plant has to do is catch and kill bugs, and it has plenty of fertilizer. Just as Darwin saw, the sundew leaf reacts when an insect gets stuck. Over half an hour or so, the closest tentacles curl towards the struggling insect, gluing it more firmly. Then the leaf folds right over the victim. This holds the prey against the glands on the leaf that release chemicals to dissolve and digest the insect. On seeing this, Darwin wrote, "By Jove, I sometimes think Drosera is a disguised animal." And in a way, he was right. In the swamps of Florida, sundews compete with other predators, with animals, for prey. In places, the ground is carpeted by pink sundews. For most of the time, there's no shortage of prey. The sundews have plenty to eat. But the plants have competition. A wolf spider. The spider builds a network of threads over the forest floor. Anything walking on the web sends vibrations back to the spider, hiding in a burrow at its center. The attack is lightning fast. When food gets scarce, the spiders respond by building bigger webs, which catch more insects and deprive the sundews of food. And the plants face competition from other creatures. It takes time for a sundew to kill and digest its prey, and a struggling insect attracts attention. An oak toad. They're common in these wet forests and often steal prey from sundews. The sticky traps of sundews take many forms. from flat carpets to plants that grow 2 or 3 meters high. Sticky traps work so well that other kinds of plants have evolved similar techniques. This is Rorigula, which grows in just a few places in South Africa. Like a sundew, it's covered in sticky blobs, though unlike sundews, these blobs are a type of resin. They're much stickier than the sundew's mucus blobs and trap bigger and stronger insects. But Rorigula has no digestive glands on its leaves, so how does it digest its prey? It needs help from this, a tiny bug called Pamaridia. Pamaridia spends its whole life on a Rorigula plant. The bug has a non-stick wax coating, so it can walk round this forest of superglue without getting stuck. Pamaridia is a predator, and there are hundreds of them on a big plant, more than enough to process all the insects Rorigula can trap. The bugs are cautious. Rorigula can trap prey that might be big enough to damage an unwary bug. So, over the next 10 minutes or so, Pamaridia just probes and waits for the struggling fly to weaken. Now, younger bugs emerge from the sticky forest, waiting for the feast. At first, the bugs won't tolerate each other, and fights break out. But now the fly is almost dead, and the serious business of feeding begins. Pamaridia has a sharp proboscis, like a hypodermic needle, that it stabs into the dying fly to suck out its juices. Even newly hatched bugs join the feeding frenzy. After they've fed, the bugs leave their droppings on Rorigula's leaves, a ready-made, pre-digested fertilizer for the plant to absorb. Rorigula and Pamaridia have evolved a close symbiotic bond. Without the bugs, Rorigula can't be a carnivorous plant, and Pamaridia bugs are only found among these sticky branches. Sticky leaves provide all the nutrients these plants need to survive in wet forests and swamps. But one plant has taken this further. In the wild, it only lives in a small patch of wet pine forest in North Carolina. The Venus flytrap. It evolved from the sticky trap of a sundew. That slow curl of the sundew leaf is transformed into a reaction so quick it can trap an insect. Darwin was sent specimens which he grew in his greenhouse to study in detail. On close examination, he saw that, as well as spines around the edge of the leaves, there were 3 fine hairs on the surface of each lobe. He assumed they were triggers to close the leaf. To find out, he touched one lightly, but this didn't always fire the trap. But touching a second hare, the trap always fired immediately. There's a good reason for this. Firing the trap needs energy. In the wild, they live where it rains hard and often. The last thing the plant needs is for the trap to fire when hit by nothing more than a raindrop. If two hares must be touched, it's less likely that the trap will fire by accident. To spring the trap, two of the hares must be triggered within 20 seconds of each other. The bug triggers the first hare. Now the time bomb is ticking. Just one more touch. There. And the trap snaps shut. Insects have fast reactions, but the fly trap is even faster. Slowing down the action 80 times shows the trap closing in around 1/3 of a second. The spines along the leaf edge slam closed like a prison gate. But the gate isn't tightly closed, not yet. And there's also a good reason for this. The trigger hares are sensitive enough to be triggered by even small insects. Too small to make a decent meal for a growing fly trap, but the gaps in the prison bars are wide enough for a small insect to escape. And over the next few days, with nothing to keep touching the hares, the trap is reset. But more substantial meals are locked in, and this struggling continues to stimulate the leaf hares. Over a few hours, the sides of the trap squeeze together and cells on the inside release chemicals to kill and digest the insect. It's easy to see why Darwin called this the most wonderful plant in the world. The familiar fly trap has a lesser-known relative, an aquatic fly trap, the waterwheel plant. It gets its name from the spoke-like arrangement of branches, but the paddles on this waterwheel are lethal traps. Each trap is fringed with sensitive trigger hairs. The traps are only a few millimeters long and work just like the fly trap. But the waterwheel plant targets tiny creatures like seed shrimps and copypods. Touch the fringe of hairs and the trap fires nearly as quickly as the Venus flytrap. Even more amazing because this trap operates in water, which is much denser than air. Caught, this copypod will be slowly digested. Darwin's studies of sticky traps and snap traps proved that these plants were true carnivores. But there's a third way to trap insects, and Darwin was less sure about these. The pitfall traps of pitcher plants. He thought they might be carnivorous, but we know now that they include some of the most elaborate and sophisticated traps of all. Pitchers evolved separately several times. In the Americas, in Australia, and in Southeast Asia. They're all beautiful, but it's a deadly beauty, hiding fiendish devices to attract and kill the unwary. Such design seemed too perfect for Darwin. Could something so complex really evolve by natural selection? He needn't have worried. The answer lies in the swamp forests of tropical America. The trees here are laden with bromeliads, relatives of the pineapple. Many grow as epiphytes, clinging to the branches and trunks of trees, high off the ground, where they're bathed in sunlight. But with their roots dangling so high in the air, they can't absorb water and nutrients from the soil, like normal plants. Instead, their leaves form a well at the centre of the plant, which fills with water when it rains. The well also catches leaves falling from the trees, so the plant can absorb all the water and food it needs from its own private reservoir. Or not so private. Many creatures see bromeliad wells as miniature ponds. In South America, poison dart frogs search from plant to plant, looking for a well not yet claimed by anyone else. A safe place to rear tadpoles. But some bromeliads are not so welcoming. Like most bromeliads, Brocchinia has a central well deep in the heart of the plant. But this one is acid and full of digestive enzymes. Its leaves are coated in wax, making them slippery as ice. Ants exploring these leaves can't get a grip, slipping and sliding towards the deadly pit, where they'll be digested and turned into plant food. From such simple beginnings, natural selection has created more elaborate traps. Several of the most elegant are hidden in remote areas of swampy pine forest in the southeast of the United States. The Sarracenia pitchers. Stuart McPherson is a botanist and explorer who's discovered many new species of pitcher plants. He's tramped and squelched through miles of these swamps to find some amazing places.
These are the North American pitcher plants, the Sarracenia. They produce these tall, upright pitchers, and they attract insects by having honey-sweet nectar. And as they try and get at that nectar, they then slip inside. The prey then falls straight down to the bottom of the trap. But it can't escape from there. They simply can't climb out up on the inside of the pitcher. So it dies, and then the plant secretes enzymes and acids and breaks up the bodies of those trapped animals.
This is the yellow pitcher, but in this particular swamp, not all of them live up to their name.
This species in particular is incredibly variable. Every population pretty much is a bit different, but there's many different varieties. And here's one over here, which is red with a yellow lid. You can see all these red veins and patterns. This advertises the trap to its insect prey, and that's what attracts it. Over here, there's even another one. And this third one, within just a few metres, is pure blood red, and it really stands out from all the other surrounding plants. It makes the perfect advertisement for that deadly trap.
The different bright colour forms of these pitchers work like flowers, eye-catching patterns that advertise sweet nectar. And standing out from the rest, the white-topped pitcher. In a few very precious places, they cover the landscape, looking like some unearthly flower meadow. A purple haze of blazing stars grows up through the pitchers, drawing countless insects to these bogs, potential prey for the pitchers. Beads of tempting sweet nectar stand out on the underside of the lip, which is also covered in fine downward pointing hairs that make it hard for an insect to keep its footing. The tall, conspicuous pitchers advertise the nectar, drawing insects as would any bright flower. They're so busy gorging themselves on the nectar, they don't notice that it's getting harder to hang on. The slippery sides of the pitcher mean there's no escape, as the plant secretes digestive enzymes to slowly dissolve its victim. The meal more than repays the costs of making all that sweet nectar, but sometimes the effort is wasted. The sweet droplets are stolen by swallowtail butterflies, far too big to fall into the trap. And many pitchers have a resident green lynx spider waiting to snatch smaller prey before they're caught by the plant. There are 8 or so different kinds of Sarracenia pitchers, growing mostly in the warm and humid southeast corner of the United States. But this, the purple pitcher, grows all the way up into Canada. The purple pitcher is unusual for another reason. It doesn't produce enzymes to digest its prey. Yet it's still a carnivore. Its lid produces nectar and is clothed in downward pointing hairs. It's just as lethal and efficient as its relatives. But like Roridula, the purple pitcher relies on help to digest its prey. Trapped insects drown and sink to the bottom, where the snake-like larvae of a mosquito called Metrionemus chew and shred the bodies, releasing small particles into the water. Floating above Metrionemus are other mosquito larvae, Wyomia. These have mouthparts like brushes that create strong currents of water, drawing in the small particles. Both mosquitoes release their waste products into the water, full of nutrients that the plant can absorb. The purple pitcher is a unique habitat. This kind of mosquito larva is only found inside these pitchers. All North American pitcher plants live in wet places, and sometimes that can be a problem. Heavy storms are common here during the summer. The parrot-headed pitcher has a lid that forms a hood, covering the pitcher and stopping it filling up with rain. But it lives in swampy hollows that often flood during downpours. Its hood can't stop it being completely submerged, but this doesn't mean it can't catch prey. The hood creates a narrow entrance hole leading to a tube lined with backward-pointing hairs. This pitcher works like a lobster pot in miniature. There are no miniature lobsters here, but there are tadpoles. They graze on the surface of the pitcher, but if they enter the trap, they can't back out. The only way is onward to the bottom of the pitcher. There are relatives of the Sarracenia pitchers elsewhere in the New World. The largest variety is found in South America. But to find them means climbing to the tops of vast blocks of ancient sandstone, rising thousands of meters into the air above the jungles of Venezuela, Brazil and Guyana. These isolated mountains are called tepuy, a local word meaning house of the gods. The tops of the tepuys are flat plateaus, lost worlds high above the rainforest. This is the only home of the sun pitchers. Like all American pitchers, the trap is formed from a leaf. In sun pitchers, it looks like a flat leaf that is simply rolled up to form a tube, with a seam still visible down the front. But that doesn't mean that they're primitive. They're quite the opposite. They're beautifully adapted to life on these isolated mountain tops. Moisture from the rainforest below is forced to rise by the sheer cliffs, releasing torrents of rain. It rains nearly all the time up here, giving the sun pitchers a problem. Unlike their North American relatives, they don't have a lid to act as an umbrella, so the pitchers could overflow with water, washing out valuable nutrients, or making the pitcher so heavy it falls over. But even as it rains, the water level in the pitcher starts to drop. The seam down the pitcher hides a small hole that drains water into a flat channel. A drain pipe that carries water safely away to the base of the pitcher, keeping the water level just right. One other kind of pitcher has evolved in the Americas. It lives in the mountains of California and Oregon, where it grows to nearly a meter tall. The cobra lily. The entrance to the pitcher is hidden underneath a bulbous hood, the back of which is covered in delicate transparent windows, through which the outside world is visible, all of which fools unsuspecting insects. A fly can sense sweet nectar on the entrance rim and on the back of the hood. Too tempting to resist. But once inside, its instincts will be its downfall. Finished feeding, it tries to fly towards the light, only to find its way blocked by a very slippery surface. Of all the New World pitchers, cobra lilies look the most alien. But in the Old World, a different group of plants has evolved pitchers, of astonishingly elaborate designs. The rainforests of Southeast Asia, home to the Nepenthes pitchers. These plants grow as vines, often tens of meters long, trailing through the trees. And their exquisite pitchers grow from tendrils at the tips of their leaves. There are around 130 different kinds of Nepenthes pitchers. Their diversity is amazing. Spectacular lives here on the slopes of Mount Kinabalu in Borneo. A mountain climbed many times by Stuart Macpherson in his search for new kinds of carnivorous plants.
This is Nepenthes raja. It's actually the largest of all the pitcher plants in the world. This is a juvenile trap and they can actually get to about twice this size. And this species is known only from 4 small sites like this one. Each site consists of maybe 300, 400, 500 plants. So in total, the entire world population is just about 2,000 plants. And that's it globally.
Like the North American pitchers, these elaborate structures have evolved to trap and digest insects. But in the last few years, botanists have realized that Nepenthes pitchers are more than just predators. This is the fanged pitcher, named for 2 snake-like fangs projecting down beneath the lid. The fangs produce nectar to attract insects, which then slide off the pointed tips into the pitcher's digestive juices. But there are also insects living in the pitcher, a species of ant. They have no problem walking on the slippery walls and help themselves to the plant's prey. They even swim in the pitcher's fluid to steal food. But there's no such thing as a free lunch. The ants congregate beneath the rim and every now and then emerge to clean the rim of the pitcher, which keeps it slippery. So the ants help the pitcher catch food, and later they get their own share. In return, the pitcher provides the ants with a home, a hollow loop in its stem. The ants chew an entrance hole and build their nests inside. Only one species of ant lives with the fanged pitcher like this. All other insects are merely dinner. And other pitchers have formed partnerships just as close, but with a more sinister outcome. The white-band pitcher, named for an unusual band of white hairs just below the rim. Qian Li is a botanist who knows these rich forests intimately. He's discovered several new kinds of pitcher plants and now knows how this one collects its food.
This is Nepenthes albomarginata. It's one of the most unusual pitcher plants. It's got a very distinctive white band around the edge of the peristome here, which is unique in the entire genus. And only recently did we find out that this white band is attractive to termites. They feed on this band, and in so doing, a lot of them fall inside the pitcher. So it's a termite specialist. It's very difficult to observe in the wild. You see pitchers that have missing bands, and you'll find termites inside them, but actually witnessing them doing it, you have to be quite lucky.
One reason is that the pitcher specializes on just one kind of termite, which is mostly active after dark. Millions of termites fan out from their nest across the forest floor, moving in flowing columns that never seem to end. If a scout finds a white band pitcher, it recruits other workers and they crawl up the side of the pitcher. The white hairs are irresistible and they gorge themselves. As more termites swarm onto the pitcher, the first arrivals get pushed towards the slippery rim of the pitcher. It's not long before the inevitable happens. It's purely chance if termites find a white band pitcher, so not all pitchers have a successful night, but it's not hard to spot the ones that have feasted well.
Oh, look at this. Here's one right here, missing the white band, actually. So this is definitely going to have some termites inside. Let's have a look. Look at that. There's hundreds of drowned termites inside. These look like that they've been already partially digested by the plant. It's a hearty meal for this pitcher plant.
Some pitcher plants have given up being carnivores. They've turned vegetarian. This is the flask-shaped pitcher. It has a tiny lid bent back to expose the flask to the forest canopy above. The gaping mouths of the flask have evolved to catch leaves and twigs that drop from the trees above. Inside the pitcher, a whole varied community of creatures helps break down the leaves, releasing nutrients for the plant to absorb. Different kinds of mosquito larvae, even tadpoles. These belong to the Matang narrow-mouthed frog, a species which prefers to breed in the sanctuary of these private ponds. But it's not entirely safe here. This is Toxorhynchites, another mosquito larva, but this one's a predator. It devours other mosquito larvae. Even young Toxorhynchites are fearsome, tackling prey bigger than themselves. It only takes a few minutes for Toxorhynchites to eat its way through an entire mosquito larva. A miniature world hidden inside a pitcher. Far from just being carnivorous, Nepenthes pitchers have formed all kinds of complex relationships with animals, and the most astonishing has only just been discovered. Whilst working in the rainforests on Mount Kinabalu in Borneo, Chien realised that the biggest of all pitchers, the giant Raja pitcher, had some unusual visitors.